is your gut health? And not to ask a too personal question, are you regular? I often think about gut health being a bit like, well, eyesight, to be honest, that you don't often realise how bad it is until you realise how good other people's is. So we are talking about gut health today with Tia Ma. She's a holistic health coach who specialises in exactly that. And we're talking about the 5 foods that perhaps you should be introducing to your diet to keep you regular. Tia, these are the kind of conversations we have on Afternoons with Helen Farmer, and this is the kind of conversation that you have every day. So we're putting any embarrassment aside and really helping people out. Now, I had a bit of a moment of realisation about the realities of struggling with gut health a few years ago. I went to Dragon Mart with a friend who has that kind of umbrella term of IBS, and he very quickly said, right, before we kind of get into the belly of the dragon, we need to establish where the toilets are just so I can make a plan. And it had never occurred to me that this is something that people have to be mindful of all the time. It impacts the way they live, the way they shop, the way they eat. And it kind of blew my mind, to be honest. So what kind of issues are people coming to see you with?
Yeah, I mean, 100% based on what you've just said. I think there's such an epidemic in digestive disorders. And I think it's because we're never really taught how to actually look after it. So just to give you a few key points here, 90% of diseases can be traced back to poor gut health. And 80% of our immune system actually lives within our gut. So it's, what you're going on earlier in terms of the mind-body connection, everything is so connected. And when we're talking about gut health, we really want to try to break it down to make it super easy so that gut health can be so complex. So when we want to talk about, the core of our system, we're talking about the microbiome, which is the collection of bacteria and the viruses that live inside us. So, Helen, I don't know if you knew, but we basically like sacks of meat walking around that are home to trillions of bacteria and viruses. And I know that scares the living daylights out of people, but we need to learn. We need to learn how to actually look after this crazy ecosystem or this garden within us and helping those microbes. So as you mentioned, people go around, they suffer from IBS, they suffer from a whole heap of digestive disorders. And even past that, our gut health can be linked with our mental health. It can be linked with skin conditions, acne, eczema. All of these things are a direct link to our gut, and anxiety and depression, which is scary.
Tia, can I ask you about your own personal experiences with digestive issues? Have you had any problems yourself in the past?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, where do I even start?
Oh, no.
I spent probably about 5 or 6 years with chronic digestive issues. I was working a very, very stressful job, and I kind of lost sight of how to look after myself. So I actually developed 6 stomach ulcers, chronic gastritis, IBS, the same as what you said, literally needing to know where the toilet was at all times. And also these things kind of impact your entire life because you're terrified of what you can and can't eat. And I think that is, it was such a key thing for me, taking that step back and finally realizing the holistic route is how we're going to do it, because no pill on earth is going to fix chronic digestive issues until we look at kind of the key components of health.
And we are in a part of the world that, loves the label, loves the prescription, and perhaps doesn't love looking at that root cause. So ultimately you're treating something that isn't going to go away. The symptoms might go away, but you're not ultimately serving yourself long term. Can I ask you about some, based on your experiences, and I'm really sorry that you went through that. It sounds really, really tough, but I'm glad it's really come full circle and you're able to help people now yourself and can speak to people with true empathy, having been there, and often there is the bathroom. What are some of the things that you do and don't do on a daily or regular basis here to look after your own gut health, based on all the research you've done and anecdotally as well?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is we need to look at our diet. Everywhere we look, if you go into any shop or supermarket, everywhere there's these high inflammatory foods, sugar, flour, gluten everywhere. And these are so bad for our gut health. So the main trigger points are gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, soy, and sugar. And what we don't realize is these are kind of hidden in a lot of things, and also in our food. If you actually look at the back of packaging, there's lots of kind of parabens and pesticides and all these gums and stabilizers and things, and they're so horrendous for us, but yet it's still allowed to be put out there. And I think during my research as well, when we're talking about pesticides, like an apple that isn't organic has 52 different chemicals sprayed onto it. And our poor bodies are then having to try and fight those chemicals. And the liver starts to become overburdened with these things. So there's a great thing that the audience can pull off online. It's called the Dirty Dozen. And these are the highest fruits and veggies that have the highest content of pesticides in it. And that's something that I will look at and try to kind of avoid some of those crazy pesticide, filled foods. But gluten is another one, because what that actually does is it has a protein within it that starts to break down the lining of our stomach. And I feel like I'm breaking hearts all over Dubai.
Don't say I can't have bread. Oh, dear.
Oh, sorry, Helen. I'm breaking hearts everywhere.
Oh, no. Carb
but it's
life.
Okay. It's okay if you're not experiencing major issues.
No, I'm not.
I think this is something that we need to be aware of as well. And tying in with the diet stuff, it's also trying to look after our mindset and our stress, because for a lot of people who suffer with IBS, they're so terrified of the certain foods that can trigger them, that can't. And we kind of work ourselves into this tizzy where we're so stressed out about what we eat, and we don't know what's going to trigger us and what's not. And so managing stress is kind of such a key component, because what happens to us as well is it's this whole gut-brain connection that we hear a lot about, and the vagus nerve that is linked with our brain and our GI tract. And essentially, if we sit down and we're eating in that stressful environment, which a heck of a lot of us are. We eat on the run.
I think a lot of people today will have dined al desco, no doubt. No doubt.
Al desco, 100%. But it's trying to find little tools to stop that, so that because essentially when we're in that stress response state, we're in fight or flight mode. And if we're eating on the run, we're not actually giving our body a chance to slow down. So the fight or flight response is basically when we're getting ready to run away from a tiger. It goes back to that prehistoric time. And when we're eating stressfully or we're eating super quick, our digestive system shuts down. This is scientifically proven that we cannot digest our food. So doing small little things like sitting down with your meal and taking maybe 3 or 4 breaths before you start eating. Working in with the timings. So our digestive fire is the best between 10 and 2 p.m. So trying to pull in your biggest meal at maybe 1 or 2 o'clock. And also just trying to connect a little bit more with our food. Instead of looking at it and going, oh, carbs, proteins, fat, look at it and say, how is this going to nourish me? So it kind of stems back again to that whole mindset, that whole holistic side of things, and trying to shift our focus a little bit. Another thing that I would say as well is, if we want good gut health, increase your fruit and veg. The microbes that I was talking about earlier, the bacteria and the viruses, they love fruit and veggies. And that's how we can really kind of bring ourselves back into balance. Try to pull out some of that inflammatory food and really start digging in and enjoying fruit and veggies. And again, shifting that mindset from, well, I can't have this, but I can have this, and getting creative in the kitchen. And also with veggies, we look at fermented food, which are incredible probiotics for us, and they feed the good bacteria. So fermented food like kimchi and sauerkraut and kefir and these really tasty treats are so good to really improve our gut health.
Tia, I wanted to ask you a bit of a blunt question, but what does and again, forgive me, what does being regular mean? I don't like the word normal, but is there a normal range for how often people should be going number 2, daily or even across the kind of course of a week?
Yeah, I think 1 to 2 times a day is great. I think one of the things that a lot of people or a lot of my clients suffer with is constipation. And, we're not getting enough water and we're not getting enough fiber into our body. And we're also not giving ourselves the chance to allow the body to relax and to digest. And, movement can be such a great thing. There's, yoga and even going for walks will really, really help with stuff like that. And balancing out your meals, so having your protein, carbs and fats in each of your meals so that you're not pulling your system out of whack. And as I mentioned, the probiotics, that's going to be key for regulating yourself as well.
So if you're regular, does that mean you've got good gut health, or is that a bit of a leap?
Yes and no. So you can have, you can poop great, but if you're still suffering with other symptoms, then you need to kind of look at what might be off balance in the system. So sometimes, as I mentioned to you, we can get an imbalance in bacteria in our gut. So some things can trigger a release of toxins within us. Some of these triggers can be candida, which is an overgrowth of yeast in the gut, and SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So sometimes these things can be that underlying cause for not being regular. And it's trying to kind of unpack that and playing around with our diet, loading up on the veggies, drinking more water. Lemon water is brilliant in the morning to get things moving. And eating slowly and chewing our food, all of these things are really going to help us to become regular.
Healthy habits.
On Afternoons with Helen Farmer.
We are talking toilet habits. Are you regular? That's the question I'm asking you this afternoon. Tia Ma is a holistic health coach who can help with any digestive issues. Now, she's mentioned probiotics. Some of them are so expensive, so I needed to get her take on it.
I'll be completely honest, from my experience with probiotics, the majority of them on the market don't actually make it past our stomach acid. So, we can spend a small fortune, and if it's not actually getting into our GI tract, we've just wasted our money. Mm-hmm. So it's trying to find ones that have, quite a high count of lactobacillus, and some of them can also have Saccharomyces boulardii in it. I work with a brand called Just Thrive, and they are a spore-based probiotic, which actually managed to get into the digestive system and start balancing out that bacteria. But just as a disclaimer, for some people, when we start taking probiotics, we often feel worse because when the body is trying to rebalance out this gut bacteria, the bad bacteria can start to die off and release toxins. And this is what we call the die-off phase. So, some of my clients experience it. I can experience it sometimes too when things are a little bit out of balance. And it's just kind of being aware of that with the probiotics and knowing that they are actually working.
That's really, really helpful in itself. We have run out of time, but I would love to have you back for clinic because I know an awful lot of people do have questions. But if you could give one message to everyone listening today to do one thing or make a change to improve our overall gut health, whether we have, complaints or problems, just to give it a bit of a boost or an edge, what should we all be doing to you?
I think one of the biggest things is to, check the ingredients. In what we're eating, go for that whole food approach and really look at it as, how is this going to nourish me? And is this going to be good for me? And I think making that shift is a catalyst for change already. So trying to see and look at your plate and go, okay, cool. Well, I've got my veggies, I've got my protein. Is there anything on this that isn't going to serve my body? And I think that's a huge thing.
Tia, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. Your website is tiamar.com. That's MAHER.com. And as I said, we'd love to have you back for clinic. Awful lot to unpack here. And go forth, eat your kimchi. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Helen.
This is Afternoons with Helen Farmer.
Join the conversation
On Dubai Eye 103.8.
You can tune in to Afternoons with me, Helen Farmer, live on Dubai Eye 103.8, Sunday to Thursday between 2 and 5. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to this podcast. It helps other people find us, boost us in the ratings, and you'll get it direct to your phone.
You've been listening to a Dubai Eye 103.8 podcast. To enjoy lots more from Dubai Eye in the United Arab Emirates, just go to DubaiEye1038.com or find them wherever you normally get your podcasts.